For the great enemy of the truth is very often not the lie, deliberate, contrived, and dishonest, but the myth, persistent, persuasive, and unrealistic. Too often we hold fast to the cliches of our forebears. We subject all facts to a prefabricated set of interpretations. We enjoy the comfort of opinion without the discomfort of thought.
Welcome to PricePlow.
Hi everyone, my name is Mike Roberto and I'm the founder of PricePlow, which is a tech and media company where we compare prices to save you money on various nutrition products, and we cover on this channel a lot of different supplement reviews and talk about the news and get into a lot of diet research, and that's what we're going to do here today. Now, as you heard in the intro, sounds like there's a myth to bust, and this is a myth that is so pervasive, no matter how many studies are done, the myth just continues to persist, and that is the idea that high protein diets can cause kidney damage. And so there's one team of researchers that took it to task and put together the mother of all meta-analyses covering 28 different studies across 1,300 different participants over different ages, over different demographics, different sexes, everything that you can count under the sun to prove that high protein diets do not cause kidney damage in healthy individuals. So that's what we're going to cover today. But before we get into all the research, we need to give the disclaimer, and that disclaimer is that this video has been sponsored by NutraBio, which is a fully transparent, open formula supplement company, and they have a new breakfast series of their 100% whey protein isolates that are downright fantastic. But I gotta tell you, you can click on the links after you watch this video. I gotta tell you, NutraBio had absolutely nothing to do with the meta-analysis at hand. They had nothing to do with any of the studies that were done, prior to the meta-analysis that the meta-analysis had used. And they didn't even propose doing this. I asked them. And so this is something that I wanted to cover. And they are kindly paying for our video editor fees and the writing fees, because we do have a blog post associated with this where we cite all the sources, and that will all be in the description. So thank you very much to Mark Glazer and everyone at NutraBio. If you're looking for a third-party tested protein powder that tastes phenomenal, they're right behind me. You can click the links in the description, but I want to get into this study. Now, this meta-analysis that we're going to talk about was done because even though there's been mountains of data supporting the idea that protein is fine for the kidneys, there's never been like what I would call a perfectly done meta-analysis. And it's impossible, of course, to be perfect, but a truly, truly well-performed meta-analysis covering all these different studies from start to finish on whether or not protein is safe in high doses, if protein is safe for healthy individuals. So Dr. Stuart Phillips and his epic, incredible research team at McMaster University took it to task, and they filtered through pretty much every single study that had ever been done on protein and kidneys. And they found 28 studies that worked within their criteria. And we're going to talk about that criteria. And it covered 1,300 different participants from all walks of life. Not all bodybuilders, not all just regular males or anything like that. We have a hugely diverse array of humans covered in this meta-analysis, and they took it to task and they determined once and for all that based upon mountains and mountains of data, high protein diets do not cause kidney damage. So let's talk about how they determined what a good study was first off, because that's the most important thing. The past meta-analyses would just determine, yeah, the kidney performance was good after the fact, but that didn't really do enough. What we need are three different things here. First off, we need to have measurable data. And what they're using is glomular filtration rate, GFR. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but we need to see or be able to calculate the GFR between the beginning and the end of the study. First off, we need to have those dates and we need to have that data so that we can make a comparison. We don't want to just know if kidney function was good after the fact. We want to know that it didn't go from great to good. We want to know that it either stayed the same or got better. So that's the first thing. We need before and after data. Second, we need to be able to compare two different groups. And in order to do that, you needed to have in these studies, to become eligible for this meta-analysis, there needed to be a high protein group and then a lower protein group. And it's really a moderate protein to low protein group, and they need to be compared. And third, it cannot be an acute one meal based study. Things can change from meal to meal, but we're looking at data over a longer period of time. It's got to be at least 3 days. The body can adapt, but we need to give it some time to adapt. It's got to be at least 3 days, preferably, of course, longer, between the measurements of start to finish. And finally, the last part is that the studies needed to be a randomized controlled trial. So those are the things. Now we can go even deeper though, because we need to define what makes up a high protein diet and what makes up a moderate to low protein diet. And there's 3 criteria for that in order to satisfy our definition of what a high protein diet is in this case. So if you allow me to look at my cheat sheet here, so a definition of a high protein diet is, first off, on a daily basis, the subjects need to have at least 1.5 grams of protein per day per kilogram of body weight. Now in terms of pounds, that's about greater than or equal to 0.68 grams of protein per pound of body weight, which honestly, for a lot of people following this channel, at least a lot of people who are in the world of sports nutrition, who are athletes and bodybuilders, that doesn't seem like a high amount, but it is definitely higher than, for instance, the United States government's recommended rates, which I personally, of course, believe are way too low. We can get into that in another video. Second off, another definition of a high protein diet, and I like this one, is that it's at least 20% of your total energy intake. So 20% of your calories are coming from protein. That is defined as a high protein diet. Now many people get more. Typically, I like to see at least 15%. So I think 20% is a very good definition of a high protein diet. Third, and this is a more flat one, if a study had the high protein diet using at least 100 grams of protein per day, then that was included as well. And again, that's greater than the US recommended daily amount, but it isn't a ton compared to some of these bodybuilders. So that is the high protein group. Now we need to define what the lower or moderate protein group is. And this one's a little more simpler. What we need to see is a difference. We need to see at least a 5% difference in the amount of calories between the high and the low protein groups. So pretty much if one group had, if the high protein group in this one study had a 20% usage of calories coming from protein, and then their moderate to low protein group had 15 or less, then that counts in the study. We need to see differences. And after all was said and done, this study, this meta-analysis that was put together and all the statistics, we landed on 28 different studies, and across them, 1,300 different participants to show this. And now it's time to dig into the statistical data, calculate the filtration rates, calculate kidney function, and see, is there a difference between start and finish? So long story short, this meta-analysis is really exactly what we wanted, exactly what we needed, and it's coming from a team of rockstar researchers. Dr. Stuart Phillips, you might hear him on various podcasts, and you can tell this is the man who knows protein, and he's one of the people who's kind of convinced the industry, rightfully so, that the amino acid L-leucine, which is one of the 3 branched chain amino acids, actually that white tail out there, the amino acid L-leucine is the strongest trigger for muscle growth, the mTOR pathway. It's the biggest trigger for that. And the Dr. Stuart Phillips is the person to thank for a lot of the research covering leucine. So this is the man who knows protein, and he's got a rockstar team, and they put together what we consider to be a gold star meta-analysis here. And finally, the last step of setting up this meta-analysis, we need to talk about why GFR, or glomerular filtration rate, was used in this study. And pretty much the long story short is that GFR is often used as an indicator of overall kidney function. So glomerular filtration is actually the first step in the production of urine. And the GFR, the glomerular filtration rate, is actually the rate at which how much volume of liquid is making it, or how much volume of plasma is making it from the first step to the second step. And it turns out that this is an incredible indicator on how well the kidneys are functioning. If the rates are too low, and that's usually the biggest sign of kidney problems, if the rates are too low right into that first step, then there's problems and it's easy to identify. If the rate's too high, however, that could be indicative of problems as well, but typically it's the lower rates that are of concern. Now, I'm not going to get into the detailed process because that's out of the scope of this video, but we will make a link in the description to Dr. Armando's pictorial explanation of how glomerular filtration works. It is way into the weeds, but he explains, around the 6-minute mark or so, he explains what the filtration rate really means and overall says the same thing. This is a great indicator of overall kidney function. And so that's why it's used. We need to, in this meta-analysis, they needed to be able to either determine it mathematically or have the researchers hand it to them, in which case Dr. Stewart's team probably double-check their work as well because that's important. But either way, we need to have this data as this is the easiest way of determining kidney function. But also, on top of that, the whole idea behind the myth that kidneys perform horribly with high protein diets, that whole myth is based upon like a theory where the GFR would actually go down and show lower kidney function if that theory was correct. Now, the theory behind the whole protein kidney damage myth is that higher protein diets cause the kidneys to have to filter through and produce and excrete more urea. And that's like the nitrogen component of your urine. And the theory always proposes that the additional urea would then damage the glomerular, which would then damage the kidney, which would then eventually yield kidney or renal failure. And that is constantly used. So the step of checking GFR, making sure the glomerular is actually functioning properly, is incredibly important because we don't want to see it diminish over time, especially with the high protein diets. And so that's why it's used. We're actually kind of in a way approaching the problem from the myth's point of view. And the one thing to add though is that that theory may actually be true in the case of certain types of kidney damage, but not all types. So the theory isn't super far-fetched or anything. It's just, does this really happen for everyone, or is it just one study out there that found one type of kidney problem and those people were having problems with protein? What about healthy individuals? And that's why this study needed to be done, because we shouldn't be generalizing renal damage onto other people who are young or healthy, or any age really, who are healthy people. So finally, after doing all the statistics and after weeding out all the studies and didn't pass all the criteria and everything, Dr. Stuart Phillips and his team determined once and for all that that theory does not apply to healthy individuals because the GFR rates did not decline. In fact, in many of the studies, renal function actually improves and is better in the higher protein groups. The myth is actually, not only is it wrong, but it's like completely wrong. And I have a few theories on why that may be. But effectively, we have a ton of different studies from all kinds, and some of these studies used almost obscene amounts of protein. For instance, in the bodybuilding community, a lot of people know Dr. Jose Antonio. In one of his studies, some of the bodybuilders were eating as much as 3.6 grams of protein per kilogram, which to some people might not seem even that crazy, but it is absurd compared to the regular individuals. And once again, nearly every single time, if you look at the table of data, the high protein group had better kidney function than the low protein group, and it often improved from start to finish. Nearly every single time. And that's why this myth needs to die. It needs to go away because it simply isn't true. And I'm not just talking about bodybuilders. There's all kinds of different studies here. We have studies like Wycherley in Australia. They compared high protein diets to high carbohydrate diets. And in that case, high carbohydrate did a lot worse. High protein was better. We have studies on menopausal women. Same thing. We have studies on Asians. We have studies with all men. We have studies with all female. We have studies with mixed race, mixed gender, and it's nearly always the same. High protein diets not only don't have kidney damage, they actually improve. And there's even one study. Now don't take this out of context, because if you do have kidney damage, you obviously need to see your doctor, and you need to obviously know that you're monitoring your blood work very frequently. But there's even one study on, and this was not used in the meta-analysis, don't get me wrong, but there's even studies out there that show high protein diets or higher protein diets improving kidney function for even those who have renal damage. And so we have that cited in the blog post. It's definitely worth reading, and don't read it out of context, because obviously you need to see your doctor and you need to see, like, you might have a different type of renal problem than the people in that study. But not even all types of kidney problems need to have these lower protein diets. Now, one of the things that I noticed as I was looking through all this data and seeing the high protein groups consistently perform better, especially when compared against like high carbohydrate groups, I start seeing certain things. And once I was looking up the glomerular and looking at that function, you start noticing that certain things can go wrong if blood pressure is wrong. And one of my ideas here is that kidney function could actually improve with higher protein function, not necessarily because protein is restorative or doing anything magical, but just because the idea of using more protein in your diet typically, first off, satiates you more, and then it also displaces fats and carbohydrates. And high sugar diets, not high sodium diets, high sugar diets are what really, more often than not, can cause high blood pressure. High blood pressure can be very damaging to the kidney. Right on the membranes of the glomerular, that's where there could be a lot of damage. That's where these rates get all messed up. And so I'm starting to think, well, it might not necessarily just be the protein, but the fact is that when we have more protein, we are more satiated. And earlier in the video, when I mentioned, there needs to be a 5% difference between the high protein group in terms of calories, between the high protein group and the low protein group, that might not seem like a whole lot, but 5% is a huge amount, it turns out, when it comes to protein. As much as a 1% change in protein can create a huge swing in the amount of carbohydrate and fat used, because your body is oftentimes craving protein and you don't understand it. And so this is known as the protein leverage effect. We're going to make another video on this, so please subscribe to the channel. But in general, the more protein you have, the more satiated you become. There's various hormones that get affected, but also there's a theory that the body is really craving protein. And when you get that, you become more satiated, and your body is no longer fighting to get protein in whichever way it can. Like, your body will get its minimum amount of protein, or it'll die trying, whether it takes you a whole steak or 4 pizzas to get there, it's gonna get its protein. And so just by the mere fact of adding more protein, it might not be fixing the kidneys or anything, it's just allowing you to lower carbohydrate, and it's allowing you to lower calories in general, which is then going to do a lot of things to improve blood sugar levels, glycation, and blood pressure. And so that's my personal theory on how some of this is working. Now, maybe protein also does have some restorative things for kidneys, but what I'm seeing with the glomerular is that we need to be able to have standardized blood pressure. And so either way, higher protein diets do such great things, not just for body composition, but you're seeing elderly live longer. You're seeing people live healthier lives. You're seeing less falls, less broken legs, less broken limbs. And we're seeing that the elderly need way more protein than they're getting, way more than they're recommended, but even more than they're getting, because they are the ones that are having more degradation and more breakdown, and they need to continue replenishing it. So the fear of having kidney damage from a higher protein consumption. And I'm not just talking about protein. Obviously, I love these guys and everything. I'm talking about poultry. I'm talking about fish. I'm talking about real ruminant meat like beef, real deal protein. We need to get this in, and it's going to help with so many things. But the idea of being afraid of it because of this fictitious myth just has to go away. We have old people, we have like a whole generation of baby boomers who have been duped into this whole idea that protein can damage the kidneys. And that makes absolutely no sense. Our bodies are adapted for feast or famine. They're adapted for massive amounts of protein. And when we up the protein, we displace the other stuff that can cause the actual damage. And that's why I'm so hell-bent on making sure people understand this. And the data supports this in all different directions. But if you want to look at just kidneys and kidneys alone in healthy individuals, at this point, this is a slam dunk study. Dr. Stuart Phillips is an incredible researcher. He's an incredible team. And once and for all, we have 1,300 different participants across 28 different studies, all types of races, both men and women, women who are menopausal, young bodybuilders, all kinds of different data, Asians, Africans, it doesn't matter. High protein diets, say it with me, high protein diets do not cause kidney damage in healthy individuals. And that is the end of this myth. So we have links to our blog. We'll put a link to, of course, to Dr. Stuart's meta-analysis. It's all open text. You can take a look at everything and you can understand why we needed this study. Because in the past, we haven't been able to compare before and after. In the past, we haven't been able to compare between groups properly. This study does that. And this study, no study is ever proof. But this study clearly demonstrates that this myth is simply wrong. I'd like to thank you for watching this far. Obviously, I get a little bit passionate about this stuff because there's certain things that are really, really hazardous to public health. And this protein kidney myth is definitely one of them. And so I'd like to, of course, thank NutraBio for sponsoring this video. If you're so inclined, check out our review on it. I love the maple syrup flavor of this. It's only 1 carbohydrate, 25 grams of protein, incredible stuff. But if not, that's perfectly fine. Thank you so much for watching, and feel free to subscribe, drop comments below, and I look forward to hanging out with you in the comment section. But subscribe to the channel. Let me know if you would like to see more stuff like this, because I really love research that really just nails it on the head. And when you need that, you go to Dr. Stuart Phillips. Thanks again, and thanks for watching.
Welcome to PricePlow.